You're good at that.
Practice.
We join a young scientific genius named Echo on his daily commute through Zaun. While busting up some goons and just all around looking cool, a building explodes in the distance to really add some flair to his entrance. Also, its debris threatens the city. Worried about his friends and family, our time-manipulating champion races towards Central Zaun, setting in motion a dangerous chain of events that'll lead him to see a part of himself he may not want to see. I have zero experience with League of Legends, and if a League of Legends story wasn't in the title, I would never have known Convergence was a spin-off. I had no hype for this game because I didn't even know it was in development. I just heard it was a Metroidvania, so I had to get my hands on it. When I discovered it was a spin-off, doubt entered my mind. With no knowledge of the franchise, would I still find the game fun? Turns out, yeah, I had a blast. There were some abrupt character introductions and references I didn't understand, but not enough to where I felt lost. Convergence does a great job at world building and storytelling to make this feel like a standalone story, but I'll get into all that later. There's a lot to break down first if I'm going to decide if it's a good Metroidvania or not. I'm going to front load this analysis with combat and abilities because that's Convergence's bread and butter. Let's start with its gimmick of time manipulation. Echo can do lots of things with time, but rewinding is what you'll be doing most. Especially because rewinding can bring you back from the dead. Hold a button and you go back like 5 seconds, frame by frame, so you can decide the best moment when to pick things back up. You'll be doing this a lot in combat and for platforming. I'm not going to mince words. This game starts out easy, but eventually revs things up, so much so that not having the rewind ability would make things ridiculously difficult. Some of the later platforming sections require such quick thinking that you'll swear you need to be clairvoyant, and combat gets so hectic it can get hard to see with all the garbage on the screen. This isn't a complaint though. Everything was designed around time rewind, so it only makes sense to put players in situations that require them to use it. And it always felt great to get stuck in an impossible combat scenario only to finally find the one moment you can dodge everything and get out unscathed. I'm not gonna lie, I got frustrated with some of the bullcrap situations I put myself in, but yelling at the TV's part of the fun. I guess it didn't help that I sucked at the game at first, but as a wise dog once said,
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
Diving deeper into combat, Echo has a bunch of tools at his disposal. Let's start with the basics. He has a 4-hit combo with his big sword bat thing that grants him airtime during aerial combos, and a boomerang-like projectile called the Time Winder. I liked the Time Winder because it came with some nuance. You could just throw it to do damage, or you could throw it at a specific distance so it opens up, doing more damage than usual. Combat that encourages players to focus on positioning makes combat more engaging. Echo has a dodge with iframes and can later purchase new moves like a parry and other attacks. I honestly felt like the other attacks weren't very helpful, and the parry wasn't my favorite. Going back to positioning during combat, the parry doubles as your dodge roll. If you don't press dodge at just the right moment, you roll forward instead of staying in place and parrying. Obviously, the solution is get good, but it felt clunky. An easy fix would have been to press dodge in neutral stance to parry, but that's just me. Echo's time manipulation abilities is where the real fun happens. Aside from rewind, Echo can slow things down, teleport strike, and blow things away with an AoE burst from his body. Rewind uses time charges, the number at the bottom left of the screen, and the other moves are limited by the blue bars. The blue bars recharge over time, but time charges can only be refilled through pickups from crates and enemy drops or through gadget passives. More on those later. Each time ability adds a strategic element to combat, but they also work for platforming. As Echo jumps, grinds, and swings, he'll also be stopping platforms from falling, teleporting through walls, and moving heavy things with his burst. The way the devs integrated every ability into combat and traversal was outstanding, and some of the platforming challenges they concocted throughout Zaun will have you questioning your platforming skills. There's some real challenging platforming sections, and each felt great to overcome. This is Convergence's greatest strength. It makes you feel awesome. You're given tools and opportunities to do some really cool stuff, and pulling off some of this stuff feels incredible. Frustrating at first, but incredible in the end. The boss fights were only okay, many of which were literal repeats against certain characters or derivations of big bulky people swinging hammers or whips or whatever. Maybe they'd get a pop from LOL fans, but not so much from a non-fan like me. I found boss encounters to be too easy and kind of samey. Not all were bad, and some were spectacles, like Jinx and Warwick. The Warwick fight especially, because it made clever use of the teleport move. And the fight against the twins was intense and well crafted for a gank fight. Boss fights would have been more memorable had they been more difficult or forced players to use their time abilities in interesting ways, like in the Warwick fight. I don't even remember the later fights because I would just spam Echo's AoE blast to knock bosses down, beat the snot out of them until they recovered, and then blast them again until I won. Cheesy, but effective. Earlier I mentioned gadgets. These are craftable accessories Echo equips to get passives, like adding more rewind charges, or allowing you to rewind further back, or making your air dash an attack. Crafting these requires you to find the materials first, and most materials are rewards from off-the-beaten-path platforming challenges. Gadgets are the extent to which you can customize Echo, beyond cosmetics. There's a hub area called Hub, where all the NPCs with side quests live. And by side quests, I mean game-spanning fetch quests, where you find stuff and bring it back to them for rewards. Salts and lilies can be found and given to an NPC who gives you color palette swapping skins, but they don't do anything. I was always sad when I found these because most salts are locked behind excruciatingly difficult combat rooms. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, is what I'm saying. Clockwork champions, little figurines of LOL champions, can be found and returned for cogs, the game's currency. Cogs can be spent to unlock new abilities and to craft. There's a dude in your hideout who wants artifacts, and these net you more time charges for rewinding and are absolutely essential. Trust me. The last item you can collect are letters, but I didn't read a single one of these. I assume they expand on the lore, which might make LOL fans froth at the mouth, but I felt the story on offer worked well enough, so I skipped all the reading. I'm just not a reader while playing video games. Sorry, not sorry. And that's everything to discover in Convergence. If you want to upgrade Echo, you gotta explore. Exploration is rewarding, but I wouldn't call it exploration. Observation might be more apt. Convergence is a very linear game that doesn't require much backtracking, if any at all. Once you start a biome, you can collect everything in it if you're observant enough. Of course, you can backtrack if you miss something. The in-game map tells you completion percentage for each area, and re-entering a biome gives you a message letting you know you can leave at any time using an option in the pause menu. I love quality of life stuff like that. As for the biomes themselves, they're interesting and varied. A rundown amusement park, a sewer with darkness that will literally eat you if you stay in it for too long, a garden area that's a direct contrast with the other concrete city biomes, and a floating rock concert. Each feels distinct enough to ensure you won't get bored, and that's a huge plus in my book. Convergence's presentation was high quality all around. Important story beats were told in a couple of ways. A comic book style was used for dramatic moments, and they looked nice, but the action scenes were fully animated and looked great. As far as the environments go, the bright accent colors in Zaun popped against the muted urban landscape, much like graffiti. But the tone was a little off. Zaun's supposed to be this oppressive, polluted city where its people are being exploited and neglected by an upper class, but I really wasn't feeling that. Every character you interact with in the hub is cheery and optimistic, save the old guy with the figurines. But his plight was about something he did in his past or because he missed his daughter. And maybe that's the point. The devs wanted you to enjoy these characters instead of feel sorry for them or to have them bring you down. And I agree that that was the right move, but maybe there should have been something else done to get this oppressive tone across. Maybe the oppressive tone was spot on and I would have caught that if I actually read the letters. I don't have the answers, and it wasn't like it took much from the overall game. The music worked. It all sounded quality, but there was this one track they played a lot. They even arranged it differently at different moments. I assume it's Echo's theme from LOL. I don't have a lot to say about it, it was just an observation. I liked the heroic arrangements of the track though. Moving on to Convergence's narrative, it tells a good story. It gives off some serious Saturday morning cartoon vibes. Most villains are over-the-top villainous. Echo has zero character flaws, and is an upstanding hero through and through. The story has tension and high stakes, but it's in the background most of the time and you don't really feel it. Where the narrative really dropped the ball was in its pacing, and by pacing, I mean Jinx. I guess Jinx is the franchise's most popular character, and the devs felt she needed to be shoehorned into the game, and she feels shoehorned. You could cut her section out, which would include an entire biome, and it wouldn't affect the plot. The entire time I played this section, I kept asking, why is this happening? People are about to die on a grand scale, and I'm worried about this? It's ultimately explained away at the section's conclusion. The explanation is logical and works, but it's not good. I get wanting to put a fan favorite into the game, but they could have integrated her better. As a non-LOL fan, her inclusion did nothing for me. I just wanted to point out this moment of narrative anemia because, well, this is an analysis channel. Take this critique with a grain of salt. For the record, the gameplay was solid and the biome was fun, and in the end, that's all that matters for an action game. But there's a flip side to this pacing coin. Though Jinx's part brought the narrative to a screeching halt, the ascent up the final biome was a masterclass in pacing. No spoilers, but this final stretch focused on platforming and reflection. As Echo climbs, there's no threatening enemies, and the platforming flows at a speedy clip, allowing players to just enjoy Echo's velocity while he reflects on the adventure and the upcoming battle. There's a calm before the storm vibe throughout this short section, adding to the final confrontation's intensity. For reference, think of climbing those iconic stairs before your fight with Dracula in Castlevania. Convergence's final ascent and Castlevania's staircase are very effective ways to prime players for the final fight. This is how you should build to your game's climax. So many times I've played Metroidvanias where they dampen their climax with puzzles or backtracking or more exploring when really, all you gotta do is prime the player before letting them at it. In writing, the shorter the climax, the better, and it works for video games and movies too. To that end, Convergence does a great job. Rounding out the story, Convergence does some other interesting things too. My favorite being the conflict between Echo and his future self. It comes to a satisfying conclusion and almost leads to a great ending. I say almost because the devs couldn't commit. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it, but the after credits scene alleviates any ambiguity. And you may like that. For me, I thought it took something away. Anyway, after everything's said and done, you get thrown back into the hub and told you're free to roam around as you please. Basically, there's no post-game content, and there's no alternate endings or secret biomes. That's my major complaint with Convergence. The post-game only exists to satiate your OCD. There are other things to complain about, such as its performance. I played on the Switch, and there were times it looked a little choppy from frame rate dips. Not ideal for precision platforming. I also found the button inputs to be laggy. I'd press the jump button, and it'd take a fraction of a second before Echo would actually jump. Also not ideal for precision platforming. I experienced glitches here and there, like a character on the screen when he shouldn't have been, and that time I got stuck in the door. The game crashed a lot too. I played for 10.5 hours and it crashed 5 or 6 times. It was annoying, but the game thankfully has a very generous checkpoint system. Silver linings, I guess. The game could have used more enemy variety. No exaggeration, but there may have been like 7 enemy types in the whole game that they just kept palette swapping for each biome. I also found the game to get visually noisy at times. Lots of explosions and effects from the time manipulation abilities would fill the screen until it was a jumbled mess. And I hated the afterimage that followed Echo around, though it's a cool concept in theory. In practice, it hindered more than it helped. Its appearance meant your special move Chrono Break was ready to use, which is this really powerful attack localized around the afterimage, but it'd mess with my head whenever I was doing a bunch of rewinds. With so many things happening on screen and more being added with each rewind, I'd get lost and focus on the afterimage rather than the real Echo. And this resulted in a lot of mistimed rewinds. It's something I had to train myself to avoid, but man did it lead to some heartbreak during the initial hours. Would I recommend Convergence? Sure, but maybe not at this price point. $30 is a hefty ask, especially with its performance issues on the Switch. Maybe you'd get more mileage as a League of Legends fan, but as a Metroidvania enthusiast unfamiliar with the franchise, I'd say wait on a sale. That's not to say Convergence is a bad game. I liked it a lot, despite my lack of franchise knowledge. Its combat and platforming melds well together to create a fun action game experience, and the presentation is high quality. But, as a Metroidvania, it's pretty weak. It has all the Metroidvania hallmarks, but it just doesn't do exploration right and is far too linear. With proper expectations, Metroidvania fans will enjoy the game, and I think this might be a good starter Metroidvania for newcomers wanting to dabble in the genre. I wouldn't recommend it for young children because it does swear a couple of times, but if you want a great 2D action adventure game with Metroidvania flavoring sprinkled in, Convergence might be worth your time.
Wow. What a dick.